Hey everyone, it's Dr. Mike Roussel, and I want to welcome you to today's presentation, Troubleshooting Your Weight Loss. And this, I think, is a great topic and something that most people have questions about because it's something that pretty much everybody runs into. If you've been trying to lose weight or if you've lost weight in the past, I'm sure that you've had this problem because it happens to everyone. You're losing the weight and then all of a sudden it stops and you can't find a way to get that weight loss back up and running. So in this presentation, I want to talk about some ways to troubleshoot your weight loss. What are some things that you can do to get your weight loss jump started? Now, we're not going to go over training methods in regards to exercise specifically. We'll talk about exercise, but these are going to be non-exercise ways to troubleshoot your weight loss. And I just want to say that up front because there are lots of things that you can do from an exercise perspective that are really effective at troubleshooting your weight loss. And so, really one of the things, while we're talking about non-exercise methods, you should really be incorporating exercise and non-exercise methods and testing them, looking at your total activity. If you're not exercising for 5 hours, every week, then you're going to start running into a thing where you might be having trouble losing weight. So increasing your activity to 5 hours per week is one way to do it. Personal metric trackers, things that you can do to track your activity, have become really popular. And if you're having trouble losing weight, one of the things that you can do there that's really simple is get one of those. It could be as simple as a pedometer, or it could be, as complicated and high tech as something like a Fitbit or a Jawbone Up or something like that. And these will give you an idea of your general activity. So, I can tell you that personally, having one of those devices, and I've tried lots of different of those devices, but having those devices and having one on you is a great thing because it really allows you to get a handle on how much you're moving. And increasing your overall activity is really a key strategy in long-term weight maintenance, so losing the weight and then keeping it off. There's a lot of research that's been done at the Mayo Clinic about this whole concept. So while we're going to talk about non-exercise methods, I just want to talk a little bit at the beginning about exercise, different things that you can do. So looking to increase your total exercise activity to at least 5 hours per week, and then looking to increase your daily activity so you're taking at least 10,000 steps per day. So moving a lot more. It's about 5 miles, about 2,000 steps per mile. And excuse me, this can really be achieved a lot easier than you think. I know I have a rather sedentary job, unfortunately, working as a nutrition consultant. I spend a lot of my day on the phone or in my office, but even with a rather sedentary job like I have, I've been able to find ways to get that up to 10,000 steps per day. So that's really important, and I think it should be said as we move into this troubleshooting your weight loss. But as we're kind of moving on with that, the exercise part, let's get into some non-exercise methods to how to troubleshoot your weight loss to figure out what's going on. So this is really, the question is, when most people say that they've plateaued with their weight loss, it's a scale issue. So we're saying, how do I get the scale moving again? How do I go from, this image on the right, on the left, all the way over to this image on the right? And usually you get stuck right in between, right? And the first, if we look at kind of the transformation of this person on the screen, it's really interesting. And, the first couple pictures, the first 4 or 5, it's generally not a problem. Initially, it's kind of easy to start losing weight. But then as you've, after you've made some progress, you're going to plateau. So how do we get the scale moving again? So one caveat before we really start talking about getting the scale moving again, because sometimes if we're just looking at the scale, we could get really frustrated with our progress. So it's important to note, and this is kind of a famous picture, a version of a famous concept, is that 5 pounds of fat weighs the same as 5 pounds of muscle. And so it's really important to appreciate that, especially if you're new to fitness and you're new to resistance training or high intensity activity, if you do a lot of boot camps or you do a lot of metabolic type exercise and you've never done this before, this exercise, it does burn a massive amount of calories and is going to help you lose fat, but it's also going to build your muscle. It's also going to rev up your metabolic machinery, which is one of the reasons why metabolic activity is so powerful. But so one of the things that you're going to run into at some point is that the scale's not moving, but you're still looking better, right? Everything starts to look better. And this is really because if you start losing fat and then you're also gaining muscle at the same time, despite how it's often talked about, you can't do those things at the same time. You really can do those things at the same time. So if you're doing those things at the same time, the scale is not going to move, but you're going to be looking better. So a really key point right out of the gate, is that you need to use multiple units of measurement. Using multiple units of measurement is key, because that's going to allow us to find out, are we just getting this one-for-one change, this fat for muscle change, or are we getting a fat loss, or are we really getting nothing? Is the scale not moving and we're not getting any change because really nothing's happening, because we're at some sort of metabolic standstill? And if that's the case, that's when we really need to then get into the troubleshooting. But if you're losing fat at a similar rate that you're gaining muscle, or if you're losing fat at a rate that's a little bit faster than you're gaining muscle, so you're still losing fat and you're gaining muscle, but not as much. So maybe it's you lose 5 pounds of fat and you gain 4 pounds of muscle, right? So the scale is only 1 pound, but in reality, you're making a phenomenal transformation. Multiple units of measure allow us to get to the bottom of this. And so in this picture, I've depicted my three favorite methods that are readily available for just about anybody, especially the bottom two. So the scale. You can weigh yourself every day, right? And I recommend that you do weigh yourself every day. The scale is a very poor marker of short-term progress. So the day-to-day changes in your body weight on the scale are not very useful. But long-term changes, and I'm going to show you in a graph in a second, but long-term changes are very useful. So when you're measuring yourself on a scale, it's really important not to worry about what happens Monday and Tuesday, but more one Monday through that week, and then even through the following week. And then you can look at them all on a graph and you can see the ups and downs, right? Because your body weight fluctuates depending on your hydration status. Maybe you've had some extra sodium, maybe you've had some more carbohydrates. Whatever it is, your body weight can change, right? Kind of can go up and down on a day-to-day basis. And that really has nothing to do with body fat gained or lost, but more fluid balance. So that's why the scale cannot be as honest of a predictor of the changes that are happening in your body. But over the long term, it's a good way to keep you in check. And research shows that people who weigh themselves frequently lose weight and maintain it better than people who don't weigh themselves frequently. And I think because it's always there in your mind. If you're weighing yourself every day, you always have that, in your mind around where your body weight is. And all of a sudden you're not waking up and thinking, and you step on the scale and you're 15 pounds heavier, right? So weigh yourself every day, but look at your body weights over a long term, over a week or 2 weeks, to really see those changes. The next thing, if you look at the far right, is a myotape. And this is what I like to use to depict girth measurements. So myotape is basically just a fancy tape measure. It's fancy but still inexpensive, that allows you to get accurate measurements because it gives constant tension for things such as your neck, your chest, your waist, your legs, like your thighs, your arms, your calves. And these are things that you can measure every 2 weeks. And this is going to give you an idea of localized changes in your body. So, if you're seeing changes in your waist, generally any changes in your waist is going to be related to fat gained or lost. But if you see changes in your arms, that's usually going to be gained to increase muscle. It could be also, if your arms are getting a little smaller initially, that could be due to some fat loss as well. Same thing, you want to measure your chest, because that can be a measurement of fat gained or lost. And you look at these things all in perspective, right? So you're looking at your waist measurements, you're looking at your chest, your thigh measurements, and you're seeing how are they going up and down? Are they all going up? Are they all going down? Where are these changes happening? And you can look at the scale and your girth measurements, and it gives you a better overall picture of what's happening in your body. The last one is the one in the middle, which says the AccuMeasure, and these are body fat calipers. Now this is a little bit trickier, because with the body fat calipers, what you're doing is it's measuring a skin fold. So if you pinch your abdomen, right, and you pinch that skin, you have skin and you have fat, and you can measure that thickness. And then if you use these body fat calipers, you can measure that thickness change over time. And you can do this from lots of different sites on your body, such as your chest, a couple different places in your abdomen, your thighs, your triceps. Now, by doing all those things, you can plug in those different measurements and you can actually get a body fat percentage measurement. I'm less interested in the body fat percent change. While it is interesting and people like to know and say, oh, I'm 15% body fat, I'm less than 10% body fat. Those numbers are great to kind of throw around, but I'm really more interested in those localized changes. And with clients, I'm always less interested about the body fat actual number and more interested every, in the 2 weeks to 2 weeks. If you can measure it every 2 weeks, that's phenomenal. But those measurement to measurement changes. Are we getting changes in the abdominal skin fold? Are we getting changes, in the thigh skin fold? Are your legs getting leaner? Is your abdomen getting leaner? Is your chest getting leaner? Those things are really important, and those measurements are ones that gives you kind of the most accurate fat loss measurement, because you're literally looking at how much fat is there and then how much less fat is there at those localized spots. So if you look at, we're looking at all these different multiple units of measure. And one more thing about the skin folds. The thing about the skin folds is you need someone who's competent at doing it. So skin folds is part science, but also part art to get a consistent measure every time. And so when you do skin folds, I always recommend that one, try to find someone who knows what they're doing, who has had a lot of experience doing it, because it can make a big difference, especially because you're looking at very small millimeter changes. And the second is always take 3 measurements and average them. And that's going to help reduce your error measurement. So if you just do one, maybe you pinch too hard, or maybe you pinch not hard enough. But if you do 3 measurements and you can average them, then that's going to give you a more accurate measure of what's going on. So multiple units of measure are going to really give you a lot of information about what's going on in your body, more than just the scale from one day to the next. The scale is useful, but it's just one tool in kind of this overall arsenal. And none of these are very, they're not very time intensive. It takes 2 seconds to wake up in the morning, go to the bathroom, step on the scale. Very simple. So I recommend you do that. You do skin folds and girth measurements every 2 weeks, your scale every day, and all of a sudden you have a lot of information, and a lot more information than most people do, about what's going on in their bodies. So this is really important to do to start out, to even see if you're plateauing. So should you throw your scale out? No. Don't throw your scale out, but just use it in the context of how it should be used. Don't give your scale any more weight than it should. If your scale isn't moving, but your pants are fitting a lot better, go with your pants, because that's what matters in the end. We have kind of these numbers in our heads about how much we'd like to weigh, but really, when it gets down to it, most of us have a look that we want to achieve and a feel in our clothes. Nobody walks in a room and hopes that other people are thinking, wow, he looks like he's 175 pounds. No, that's not what you're thinking. Like, you want to feel good in your clothes, and you want to walk into a room and maybe say, people say, wow, that person looks very lean and fit. That's really what you're going after. So don't throw your scale out, but just keep it in context of really what the information it's supposed to tell you. So as we get into this troubleshooting, before we get into the troubleshooting, one of the things we need to talk about first is how weight is lost. Okay? Because one of the things that everyone talks about is, how much weight can you lose, right? Ask that question, how much weight can you lose? 1 to 2 pounds a week, right? 1 to 2 pounds a week. You can lose 1 to 2 pounds a week. 2 pounds a week. If you're really cranking, you lose 4 pounds a week. 4 pounds a week of fat loss is phenomenal, right? 1 to 2 pounds a week is average. But it's important to know that this is average, right? Every single week, you're not going to lose 2 pounds. 1 week, you might lose half a pound, right? Another week, you might lose 4 pounds. Weight loss is not a linear process, especially if you start stringing it out over the course. We always talk about 12-week body transformations, but when you start stringing it out over the course of 16 weeks, 6 months, a year, some people, depending on how much weight you have to lose and the rate that you decided you want to go about losing it, It's going to take you a year. That's fine. However long it takes, it's just important to know it's not a linear process. Some weeks you're going to lose weight, some weeks you're not going to, some weeks you might actually gain weight. But overall, your trend is going to be down. And that's why I talked about looking at your weight every single day, or not looking at every day, but collecting your body weight, measuring your body weight every day, and then looking at it over a long-term process. So when we look at troubleshooting your weight loss, you want to make sure that you have some perspective on how much weight you've actually lost over the course of, at least 2 to 4 weeks, to really say, are you really plateauing? And knowing that it's not a linear process, having a little bit of patience. But if you've been at it for a while and you need to troubleshoot it, we're going to talk about some things that you can do. The one last piece is that we often have localized fat priorities, but our bodies may have different plans. So maybe it's our abdomen. Everybody's talking about abs. Everybody wants abs. So we're always focused on abs. If our abs and our stomach, if our abdominal region isn't getting leaner, then we're not losing weight. But you can lose weight from a lot of different places. You lose weight from your thighs, from your back, from your chest, from your neck, from your arms, from your abdomen. There are lots of places you can lose weight, and maybe you're focused on one thing, like your abdomen, or maybe you're focused on your thighs, and that's your priority. But your body doesn't necessarily lose fat following your mental and visual priorities. It's going to come off from a lot of places. And a real good friend of mine had a great saying where he always says that stubborn fat is just old fat. So it's fat that's been there for a long time. And as a result, you have to lose a lot of other fat first before that fat comes off. And despite all the creams and pills and different methods, spot reduction, so specifically reducing a certain area of body fat preferentially over other areas, it doesn't happen in an appreciable way. I know of one study that used this heavy-duty cream that was based off of licorice extract that was so strong that it irritated the participant's skin. And after 12 weeks, I believe it gave them about a half an inch more weight loss on the waist after applying it multiple times per day, every day for 12 weeks. So even that, which those sort of potencies aren't available, over the counter or with prescription, they're just not available outside of a scientific lab. That was really the only thing that showed any sort of real world effect. But I'm sure you could find a lot of better ways to lose an extra half an inch over 12 weeks than putting on some irritating cream twice a day. So know that your body and your mind may have different plans about how fat is lost, but it's going to come off if you keep going after it. So when we come to weight loss plateaus, right, what causes your body to plateau? Scientists call it adaptive thermogenesis. And here's a great quote from a scientist saying that if you decrease your body mass by 10%, right, you would expect a metabolic rate decrease by 10%. So this reason being that your metabolic rate is generally related to your overall body size. So if your body becomes smaller, your body needs to burn less calories, right, to power that smaller mass. But it actually slows down more than that by about 11 to 15%. And this is from a researcher named Gary Foster. This is, kind of a quote based on his research. So while we would think if you decrease your body by 10%, you're going to get a 10% reduction in your metabolic rate. But research shows you actually get an 11 or maybe 15% reduction. Now, the good news about this is that with a carbohydrate restricted diet and with intense metabolic exercise, you can really get this reduction to be a lot less. A lot of research looking at weight loss is looking at just calorie restriction of a higher carbohydrate, low-fat diet, and just aerobic steady-state exercise, which is not very good at fat loss. But if we're looking at metabolically disruptive exercise, like high-intensity exercise, resistance training, circuits, boot camp type exercise, those things, plus a lower carbohydrate diet, that you can actually do better at squashing that reduction in your metabolic rate, and you burn a lot more calories throughout the day. So why are we plateauing? What is responsible for this adaptive thermogenesis? What is responsible for this additional 1 to 5% decrease in your metabolic rate when you're trying to lose weight? So it could be a lot of things. The frustrating part about adaptive thermogenesis is that researchers aren't really sure. It could be changes in your body weight, like that quote that we just showed. It could be that. It could be changes in your thyroid. So your thyroid, the gland that's in your neck, it releases thyroid hormone, and that is a big determining factor of your metabolic rate. Your thyroid hormone regulates your metabolic rate. It could be due to changes in leptin. We're going to talk about leptin later on in the talk. And leptin is a hormone that, kind of give you a preview now and talk a little bit about it later. Leptin's a hormone released from your fat cells that actually regulates calories burned and appetite and things like that. So maybe it's due to changes in leptin, because as you lose body fat, your leptin levels are going to be changing, right? As fat cells shrink and some die, you're going to get different changes in your leptin levels. Or could it be what the scientists call your body weight set point, that we all kind of have this set point of our body weight, where we settle in metabolically, and then your body tries to keep that set point. And if that's the case, research is not definitive with the set point, but if that's the case, you got to work really hard to create a new set point, right? But adaptive thermogenesis, what's driving it? What's driving these weight loss plateaus? Your body adapting and then thus burning less calories. We don't really know, but it can be lots of those things. But we do know one thing, that combining diet with exercise is the best way to get over it. And I gave you some quick exercise and movement tips at the very beginning. And we're going to get more specific into the diet stuff now. So when it comes to troubleshooting weight loss, I like to break it down into two different sections. Okay? Not responding versus not doing. So are you not doing some things that you think you're doing, right? Or is your body not responding to the things you're doing? Either way, we have to troubleshoot this. Right? If you think you're on your diet and following your diet plan, but you're not, and thus you're frustrated you're not losing weight, it's not actually because your diet's not working, but it's because you're not sticking to it. So that would be a not doing. But if you are sticking to your diet and you are sticking to your exercise program and you're doing it exactly how you should, consistently, but you're not losing weight, that means your body's not responding. So we'll look at two in each category and then how you can troubleshoot this. Let's start with not doing. So the first part with not doing is adherence, and this is a big one. So with adherence, I'm talking about, are you sticking to your plan? Are you adhering to your diet as much as you should, right? And one of the big things about adherence is that it's amazing how many people don't stick to their diet, but they think they are. So I want you to do two things, and you can do this right now. I want you to write it down. First, what is your plan? What's your diet plan, and what is your exercise plan? Okay, what are you trying to do specifically diet, and the action things? Maybe you have some macronutrient targets, right? So many grams of protein, so many grams of fat, so many grams of carbohydrates. Or maybe it's not that specific, but it's more like the 6 pillars of nutrition. Like you're trying to eat protein at every single meal, fruits or vegetables at every meal, restrict starchy and grain-based carbohydrates to either first thing in the morning or directly after exercise. What is it? What are you trying to do? Write that down. Okay, write down what you're trying to do, and then you need to physically track it. And in your presentation notes, I'm going to give you a sample tracking sheet, okay, and what you can do to physically track this. But it's very important that you physically track it, because one of the things that I've learned over the years is that we're much more adherent to our diets in our minds. When we think about our diets, like when you sit down on a Friday night and you're about to have maybe a big cheeseburger and some fries and a beer, or you're going to have a pizza and a glass of red wine, whatever it is, something that's not necessarily on your diet. And you're thinking about, well, should I have this? And you think back to your diet and you think, yeah, I've been great on my diet. When we think back, we tend to forget things. We tend to forget those little indiscretions, the extra glass of wine at dinner on Monday night, or the extra bread at lunch, or the snacks that we had Wednesday afternoon. We always forget those things. And that's why I want you to physically track this on paper. And that can be a real game changer. And that can help eliminate this and figure out if you're not doing what you think you're doing. And sometimes tightening up your adherence is all you really need to kickstart your weight loss again, because it gets you back on the plan. It gets you back on this with the accuracy and the vigor that you need, and it's a lot better. You're a lot better at your diet, and thus you're gonna continue on. So you don't need to be perfect with your diet. All I'm asking is that you shoot for adhering to your diet 90% of the time. If you can stick to your diet 90% of the time, then you're going to get the results that you desire out of your diet and your training program. 90% is the goal. So that's not 100%. You don't need to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect, because we're looking at making, in addition to losing weight, we really want you to change your lifestyle. So we're really looking at lifestyle changes as well. And you're never going to be perfect all the time. And there's really no need. There's really no need to be perfect. So 90% adherence is all you need. And this means, on Sunday afternoons, you can, kick back, have a couple meals, off your plan, not really worry about tracking it, and still do really well. So when we look at another of the not doing category, right, it would be sleep. So sleep is really important. And I will give it to you. This is not your average fat loss tip. So sleep is definitely not your average fat loss tip. But I think this is a cool little graphic, right? Because it gives you like all these crazy and not so crazy ways to lose weight. And sleep is generally not something that people talk about with respects to fat loss. But there are two things. One, most of us don't get enough sleep, myself included. As powerful as I think sleep is, or know that sleep is, when it comes to weight loss, and as much as I try, I don't consistently get enough sleep. I'm still about 30 to 45 minutes shy of really where I need to be with respects to getting enough sleep. But while this is not your average fat loss tip, it's very, very important. Why is it so important? It's so important because when you look at what's impacted by your sleep, these 4 hormones are impacted by not getting enough sleep, and these 4 hormones are very important when it comes to fat loss. So the first is leptin. So when we look at leptin, what is leptin? I talked about it, and I talked about leptin a little bit earlier, and what leptin is, as I mentioned, is it's a hormone released from your fat cells, and leptin travels up to the brain, and it interacts with the brain, and it regulates appetite, and it also regulates metabolic rate and insulin sensitivity, so how sensitive your muscles or how sensitive your body is to glucose and insulin, sugar, which is important for weight loss. And for the longest time, researchers thought this was really the magic bullet that we could inject people with leptin and fix all the weight loss problems. But it's a lot more complicated than that. But research does show that one night of not enough sleep, so if you have, in several studies, they use 4 hours of sleep. So if you get a really lousy stint of just 4 hours of sleep, you get significant reductions in leptin. So leptin is one. Growth hormone is another one. Growth hormone is a hormone that is a very powerful fat loss hormone, and it's released, primarily when you're sleeping. You get a big dump of growth hormone while you're sleeping. Ghrelin. Ghrelin is a really powerful hunger hormone, appetite stimulating hormone. And ghrelin can get stimulated due to when you start cutting calories, ghrelin gets increased. Or if you're really stressed out, ghrelin gets increased. Or stress eating could be, is primarily at some level due to ghrelin. Not getting enough sleep also causes increases in ghrelin. And then finally, adiponectin. Adiponectin, like leptin, is released from your fat cells. And adiponectin is really interesting because it supercharges your muscles. So the leaner you are, the more leptin you're going to have, and it supercharges your muscles, and it makes them more sensitive to insulin, so they're better at using sugars, and it increases their calorie burning capacity. So leptin is adiponectin is another powerful hormone released from your fat cells that helps burn more fat, and not getting enough sleep negatively impacts your adiponectin levels. So now let's move into not responding. Okay, so if we look at not responding, if you're not responding to your diet, we need to start taking some action. And one of the things that we can do from a not responding perspective is carb cutting. Carb cutting is a great strategy, and you can do it a lot of different ways. I'm going to show you in the next slide kind of a hierarchy of how you can cut your carbs. But restricting your carbohydrates a little bit more each time that you hit a plateau is going to allow you to further drive your body to lose fat or use fat as its primary fuel source over carbohydrates. So as you get further into your diet, you're going to get on a lower and lower carb diet. And this is going to help you continue losing fat. So this is what I like to call the hierarchy of carbohydrates. And so what it is we look at the top of the carbohydrates you should be restricting, and then you're going to move down the list. So a lot of people say, well, can I eat fruit on a fat loss diet? Like, yes, you can eat fruit on a fat loss diet until you get down to the point where you need to restrict fruit from your diet. So first at the top, added sugar. So added sugar and refined grains. If you're on a fat loss diet and you're trying to lose weight, those two should be out of it. I mean, I would actually say that those two should be out of your diet regardless, because they're not good for you and they're detrimental to your health. So refined grains and added sugars should be out. The next thing you would need to restrict would be whole grains and starches. And now these are more carbohydrate dense, and what you'll notice is that as we go down the list, the carbohydrates become slower acting, and then also the carbohydrate density of the foods becomes a lot less. So if you look at a serving of whole grains, like a serving of brown rice, is going to have a lot more carbohydrates than something at the bottom of the list in the green vegetable category, like spinach. A serving of spinach is going to have a lot less carbohydrates than a serving of whole grains. So as we move down the list, your calorie density, so the number of calories per serving, your carbohydrate density, the number of carbohydrates per serving, and then generally also how fastly absorbed, how fast acting these carbohydrates are, also decreases. So whole grains and starches are out. After that, you're going to start removing fruit. After that, you're going to start picking off vegetables. So we want to leave leafy or fibrous green vegetables like cabbage, Brussels sprouts, spinach, cauliflower, although it's not green, is in that category as well. Those you want to keep for the end. But other vegetables, squashes, tomatoes, even some onions, those are the things that you're going to remove from your diet before you start getting rid of the green vegetables. But really, once you get down to the bottom there with vegetables and green vegetables, this is going to be a very low carbohydrate diet. So not everyone, you're not going to need to take your carbs that low unless you choose to in order to get weight loss started, jump started again. So the other second piece for if you're not responding is one of the things after a long time, after you've been dieting for a while, your body's just not responding. It could be because you've just been chronically calorie restricted for too long. And so this is a rather counterintuitive tip, but what actually happens is I would recommend that you're going to increase your calories. Now, this isn't, the general or that traditional cheat day, eat a bunch of stuff, stuff your face with as many calories as you want, and then get back on your plan, and this resets your thyroid. That doesn't really work, despite how much people talk about it. That doesn't work. What I'm talking about is a 7 to 10 day period where you're going to increase your calories by about 500 calories per day, with at least half of them being from carbohydrates. So it's going to give you about another 60 to 70 grams of carbohydrates per day. And these are, what I would call, clean or quality calories, vegetables, some fruits, kind of move yourself back up the hierarchy. And if you can, focus those starchy or grain-based carbs right after exercise. And after you do this for about 7 to 10 days, then you can slowly start taking your calories back down again, specifically your carbohydrates. Start restricting those again, and you should see a jump start back in your weight loss. You should see things back moving again. And this is a great strategy that works with people that have been dieting for a very long time. So if you've been at this for a while, this isn't something you'd put into action, 4 weeks into a weight loss diet. But, 12, 16 weeks into it, or even longer, increase your calories in a healthy way for 7 to 10 days, and then start bringing them back down again and focusing on getting that fat loss going again. So as we wrap this up, What you want to do is you want to make sure that you're measuring everything. Measure everything you can, your weight, girth, skin folds if you can, and use that to get the best picture about what's going on in your body. Then you can get into the troubleshooting and you can see, is your body, are you not doing something? So you're not getting enough sleep, do you not have enough adherence? Or is your body not responding? If it's not responding to what you're doing, then you're looking at cutting carbs and increasing calories. Okay? So that's going to wrap it up for today's talk on weight loss troubleshooting. Hope you can put these things into action and get your weight loss back on track so you can reach your weight loss goals. I'm Dr. Mike Roussel, and thanks so much for tuning in.